And my second name, my last
Write that
name,
down.
my second name. My last name is Durant with a D.
KD?
Hopefully that's on a David Letterman Netflix special coming up soon. Welcome to The Jump, though, here on ESPN2. I'm George Sedano. It's NBA Media Day, so there's some laughs, but also some serious news going on around the league, which we begin with Kyrie Irving, speaking of serious news, who was not present at Nets Media Day, but did speak virtually. Find out what he said in just a moment. Ben Simmons did not show up in Philly as promised. Can the Sixers overcome that distraction? Zion apparently had offseason surgery. We'll get an update on his health from Pelicans Media Day. And is it fair to consider Luka Doncic the MVP favorite? We travel the Media Day circuit right now on The Jump. All right, what's up? All right, I'll be joined by Zach Lowe and Ramona Shelburne here in just a bit. But first, here's Kevin Durant earlier at Nets Media Day when asked about Kyrie Irving. Let's take a listen.
Kyrie is not here today. There's this law here in New York with health and safety protocols. Are you concerned about his availability at home games going forward?
No.
So you expect that not to be an issue?
I expect it not to be. That's on Kyrie, and that's his personal decision. What he does is not on us to speculate what may happen. But we trust in Kyrie, and I expect us to have our whole team at some point.
All right, and now joining us is the man who asked KD that question, Brian Windhorst. Kyrie Irving was not present at Nets Media Day due to health and safety protocols. And here's what he said about his vaccination status when asked at a virtual press conference.
Honestly, I like to keep that stuff private, man. I'm a human being first, and obviously living in this public sphere, there's just a lot of questions about what's going on in the world of Kyrie, and I think I just would love to just keep that private and handle it the right way with my team and go forward. Obviously I'm not able to be present there today, but that doesn't mean that I'm putting any limits on the future of me being able to join the team. And I just want to keep it that way. So please respect that, my privacy.
So welcome back, Brian. So how are the Nets handling this controversy surrounding Kyrie?
Well, you can understand why this is confusing, because last week General Manager Sean Marks said, we expect everybody to be ready. Here today we have Kevin Durant saying, I don't expect his availability to be a problem. You have Kyrie saying, I'm not going to talk about it, but I expect to be with my team. But that isn't clear how any of that's going to happen. And what they've said was going to happen isn't happening. So it definitely leaves you in a bit of a weird scratching your head world here. The thing about this is not on the NBA's terms. This is a decision by the city of New York. He cannot get an exemption from the NBA and play, and he is facing the reality if he doesn't become compliant or get an exemption, he is not going to be able to practice here in Brooklyn, and he is not going to be able to play in games here in Brooklyn, in New York, in San Francisco, and potentially even in Toronto. That's well over half of the season. That is not a tenable way to go forward. So how this proceeds from here is really a mystery. We are in completely uncharted territory. We have never seen anything like this. The Nets have been working on this, George, for 4 or 5 weeks. This isn't something that just landed on their lap. Since this order came down in mid-August, they knew this potentially could be a problem. They had several other players who were not compliant. Those players became compliant because everybody was here today except for Kyrie, and we will just have to wait and see what happens next.
And since we've heard from two of the big three, let's hear from James Harden, Brian, who you spoke to as well, and asked about his personal contract extension as we talk actual basketball here.
It's not about the money for me. It's not about I've been on enough teams where we fell short. My mindset and my goal is to make sure that we're able to build and continue to build this team to be able to compete and contend for multiple years at the highest level. So it's not about the money. You win a championship in New York, the money will come.
So certainly that contract situation is something that people are going to keep an eye on, Brian. So do you get a sense the Nets and Harden will get a deal done soon?
Well, this is the other thing that's going on with the Nets. Earlier this summer, when they got the Kevin Durant extension done, Sean Marks said he hoped by today that that Harden and Kyrie Irving would have similar long-term extensions. That has not happened. And the reason I asked Harden that question was because he can sign a contract extension right now for 3 years, or if he becomes a free agent next year, he can sign for 5 years and about $90 million more. That's why he says the money doesn't matter, but frankly, I don't 100% believe that. The money has to matter at that level. So, and with Kyrie Irving, they're trying to get him on the court to play now, much less worrying about 3-4 years from now. So those deals not getting done, I would say it's mildly concerning because no player likes to have this hang over them in training camp, and you don't want Irving and Harden to be possible free agents next year. So another thing to watch with the championship favorite Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, certainly not what Sean Marks envisioned by any stretch of the imagination. Brian, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, man. Going to be interesting as heck to follow all season long. So thanks again.
Thanks, George.
Okay, so I want to bring in our panel here. Senior writers, Ramona Shelburne, and of course the host of the Low Post podcast, Zach Lowe, to discuss more on the Nets. And Zach, we'll start with you. Could vaccination status stand in the way of the Nets' success this season?
In theory, of course it could. If Kyrie Irving is going to be unable to play at home and that persists for the entire season, including the playoffs, absolutely, they're no longer the championship favorites, even though they still have James Harden and Kevin Durant. And boy, does the James Harden trade all of a sudden go from luxury to absolutely essential as of today. But look, the Nets have all along been pretty confident. No one's going to miss games. They'll get this taken care of. But as Wendy said, that confidence was sort of like as of today. And I sense that they're a little bit shaken by the sense that it's not done as of today. I guess we can take confidence in Kevin's comments about we assume he's going to be on the team, Kyrie's comments about no limits on the future. But until it's done, until he's playing, I don't think there's a reason to have no concern. And I also don't think there's a contract extension until it's done.
You know, what's interesting in the NFL, they went through this a couple of months ago when players were reporting to training camps. And I was speaking to an agent for an NBA player, for a lot of NBA players, whose agency also represents NFL players. And he said, you know, the NFL reframed this as accountability and availability. You're accountable to your team and you're available to your team. And I think what's happened in the NBA lately with the status of vaccinations is it has not been framed as accountability and availability to your team. It's been framed as is somebody going to make me do something? Is it a mandate that I don't feel comfortable with and I don't want to do it because it's not my choice? It's somebody making me do it. There needs to be a reframing of this in the NBA in order for these kinds of things to be settled like they have in the NFL, or it's going to be a storyline all year. It's one or the other. And I think with a team like the Nets that has championship aspirations, as Zach said, you can't look at this and say it's not going to affect them. Kyrie Irving's an all-star player. I mean, he's an incredible player for them that they're counting on. If he's not there for half their games or more, that's going to affect him.
Yeah, and look, he's not the only player, a star level or all-star caliber player that is dealing with this. We know that Devin Booker is going to be in health and safety protocols after his Twitch conversation recently, and Bradley Beal revealed that he is not vaccinated as well. So, Ramona, this is something, to your point, that's not just going to affect the Nets at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's all across the league. And we're talking about a relatively small number of players at this point. If you talk in terms of percentages, it's probably the NBA is close to 90%, but the 10% that are not are going to be subject to, that are not vaccinated, are going to be subject to much stricter rules, and especially so in San Francisco and in New York. I think it will only get stricter across the country. Those are the first two markets who have taken this step, but I think it will only get stricter across the country. And so the Players Union has thus far stood firm in saying it's up to the player, and there's testing protocols that you can go through if you don't want to be vaccinated. But at some point, as Brian said in the interview you did with him, George, it is going to be up to the governments, the local governments, and the NBA and the Players Union. Their rules don't necessarily supersede what the local governments say.
Well, to Ramona's point, there are other markets, big markets, teams in big markets that are watching this and wondering, particularly in Los Angeles, I think, wondering, are the New York and San Francisco laws, which, by the way, are a little bit different. The San Francisco one's even stricter than the New York one. Are those going to be applied to us? Now, the Lakers last week, they said we're fully vaccinated, so they're done. They have this taken care of. But this does not appear to be going away. Like Ramona said, it's a relatively small percentage of players. And I think the Golden State case is going to be interesting because any of these cases are going to be interesting because the union and the teams, as Brian said, there is no precedent for any of this. And I think they're still negotiating right now. What is the penalty, if any, if a player can't play in the home games? Can the teams withhold salary? How much of the salary? There's no precedent for any of this. They're still negotiating it right now at the 11th hour before the season starts.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild, wild time here over the next couple of weeks for sure as we try to see all this unfold in real time. All right, Zach, Ramona, thank you. You guys will be back in just a little bit. But before we get to our next guest, Doc Rivers spoke today at Sixers Media Day on Ben Simmons. Let's take a listen.
We're going to focus on who's here. We're going to try to build our team out to who's here right now, with hopes that we do have Ben at some point. But right now, that can't be our focus. Our focus, I can only touch the people who are in front of me.
And now we welcome in Tim Bontemps from Sixers Media Day. Tim, what was the overall reaction to Simmons being absent in Philly?
Well, George, I would say the overall reaction was disappointment, and that was disappointment for a variety of reasons. You know, Tobias Harris said he was disappointed that he didn't see this coming because he said if that had been the case, he'd have gotten the whole team together the day after that Game 7 loss to the Atlanta Hawks in the Eastern Conference semifinals when Ben Simmons obviously infamously passed out of that dunk with 3.5 minutes to go in Game 7. He would have took the whole team to Ben Simmons' house and had a talk with him and made him understand the fact that they all were taking responsibility for that loss and not just dumping it all on Ben Simmons and that it is all Ben Simmons' fault that their season had ended. Joel Embiid said he was disappointed that the situation had gotten to this point and that the relationship between the Ben Simmons and the Sixers had deteriorated to the point where Ben Simmons has not shown up. Adrian Wojnarowski has reported he has no intention of ever playing for the team again. And now we're sitting here on the eve of training camp waiting to see if Ben Simmons will actually show up or if the Sixers will go into the regular season, waiting to see what will happen. And Doc Rivers expressed disappointment that his comments in the wake of that Game 7 were, in his opinion, misconstrued to where he was not giving Ben Simmons the kind of support he had given him all season long when he had been his staunchest defender in the media. So really throughout the day, it was just a series of guys saying, we wish this was not the situation. We want Ben Simmons to be here. Joel Embiid was really adamant about the fact that he wants to play with Ben Simmons. He believes that the Sixers can win a championship with Ben Simmons and him as the core members of the team. And now they just have to sit back and wait and see if Ben is going to decide to come be here in Philadelphia with the team and play, or if they're going to have to go into the season without him and see if a trade materializes at some point.
I was going to ask you about Doc's comments because that to me is the fascinating part of this equation because I mean, I don't know what could have been misconstrued there. Look, Ben had a bad game, and I don't think a bad series, right? Like, nobody's going to dispute that part of it. But I don't know how Doc's comments could have been misconstrued when he was asked about Ben being the point guard for this team. I mean, it seemed pretty cut and dry what he said that day.
Yeah, I mean, to refresh people's memories, Doc Rivers was asked, is Ben Simmons a championship-level point guard? And Doc said, I don't know. Now, he says now he was trying to say, I don't know that answer. I don't want to talk about that question, etc. But to your point, George, the thing that stood out about that quote in the moment was that all season long, Doc Rivers, from the moment he was hired as the coach of the Sixers, had adamantly been in Ben Simmons' corner. He defended him about people criticizing about not taking threes. He had defended him about people saying he needed to shoot the ball more, needed to play a different style. Doc had been his loudest defender. And the fact that in that moment, he said, I don't know, even if, he could try to say now that it was in response to something else and trying to kind of deflect the question. That was what made it resonate the way it did, and it's why it's resonated, frankly, all the way until today when the Sixers reconvened for Media Day.
Yeah, and that's why it stood out, because of what you mentioned. He had been such a staunch defender.
Yep.
All right, Tim, thanks so much for joining us, man. Appreciate it.
Anytime, George.
All right, more on the Sixers in a moment. Coming up, is Ben Simmons' situation a distraction that the Sixers can overcome? We'll discuss it next here on The Jump. But first, here's a distant replay from the bubble last year with Bam Adebayo. Or out of the bayou, as Kendrick Perkins likes to say. There it is.
Flush. Wow. 26 points, 10 rebounds for Bam Adebayo. The Miami Heat back up by 1.
Point center.
Say, I'm disappointed because, I look, obviously we haven't won anything, but look at what we've been able to do. Obviously we haven't done anything in the regular season, and I got to be better. Everybody's got to be better. But I still believe that, we got a chance to win with him. I know he's going through a lot, and, I guess just got to let him, be himself.
All right, welcome back to The Jump. I'm George Sedano here with Zach Lowe and worldwide Momo, Ramona Shelburne.
I'll roll with that nickname.
That was Joel Embiid on Ben Simmons. The Sixers-Ben Simmons relationship is a hot mess right now. Let's just be real, okay? Simmons was not at Media Day. Daryl Morey said that the team is disappointed he's not there. And over the weekend, his teammates were even discouraged from visiting him in L.A. in an attempt to sway him to return to the team. So, Ramona, do you think Philly can overcome this Ben Simmons situation?
Well, I think whether they can overcome it is central to the leverage in any trade discussions here. If they start off the season really well, then they have a lot more leverage because they can wait quite a bit longer in order to move him. There's no sense of urgency. But if they start off really poorly, and this is a huge distraction, then I do think there is a sense of urgency. But I was talking to somebody very close to Ben Simmons over the weekend, and they made this point, which is essentially, why do the Sixers even want Ben to show up at this point with all that has happened this season? Because mentally, after everything that's been said, after a season, an off season where this has been the dominant storyline of the off season, where everybody has got into what was said at press conference, what wasn't, and his woeful shooting, it's not going to be the same Ben Simmons that they have seen in the past. I mean, it's just where they can call him. I mean, Joel Embiid, he tried to go and see him in Los Angeles. Tobias Harris and Matisse Thybulle, they tried to go see him, but they've been trying to see him all summer. Like, they've been trying to talk to him all summer. I don't know that the last ditch effort to go see him in person was going to change anything. And so, even if he does show up eventually, let's say it's a couple months from now, what Ben Simmons are you going to see?
First of all, I sympathize with Ben Simmons in this sense. I don't want my friends just popping into my house unannounced. I don't need that clutter in my life. Second of all, look, I actually think the Sixers, as long as Joel Embiid is healthy and play in most games, I think they can withstand Simmons' absence in the sense that I think they'll be a solid winning team, not a championship contending team. If Tyrese Maxey makes a leap, if Thybulle gets better, if Shake Milton gets better, I think they'll be a solid playoff team. And that's enough to sort of quell the noise and the distraction and all of that. It's enough to just establish a baseline of stability. But can they overcome it in the sense of, can they contend without him? Absolutely not. This team could contend, at least have puncher's chance against the Bucks and the Nets in the East. They could at least talk themselves in to championship aspirations. If they were whole, if Ben was there. Without him, their ceiling is just nice, frisky playoff team. So in that sense, they cannot overcome his absence. They'll never reach their ceiling until this is resolved one way or another.
Yeah, and again, look at the numbers, right? When they're on the floor, Joel and Ben, and historically they've been really, really good, right? Like, I think that's part of the equation here, or at least has to factor into the equation. I just don't know if any of this is reconcilable at this point. But, and also to Zach's point, there was a comedian, I don't remember who it was, who used to say, in his bit, he would say, remember when you were a kid and, people would ring the doorbell at your house, you'd be like, oh, I wonder who's there. Let's go see. And then now it's like the doorbell rings and you hide, right? That's why we all have like a Ring app or whatnot. So I'm with you, Zach. And who wants people?
You can show up at my house. I have a toddler. You can come in.
There we
Just
go.
Knock first.
Party at Momo's house.
Fine.
So there you go. All right. But clearly a lot to be figured out when it comes to Philadelphia. Now joining us from Mavs Media Day is our insider, Tim McMahon. So, Tim, Luka Doncic is the early favorite to win the 2022 MVP award. Let's look at these odds that we've got here with Luka. If we have him here in a moment. There we are. Yeah. So Luka there at the top. Giannis, Durant, Embiid, Curry. We got LeBron in the second column. Wow. Lillard, Jokic, the defending MVP in the second column as well. Booker and Trae Young. So, Tim, do you think it's fair to list Luka as the guy, the preseason MVP?
Look, his production has put him in that conversation. You can look at that list and see several other guys who have been there, done that, who've won MVPs, and more importantly, who have won championships, who have made deep runs in the playoffs. And Luka he was asked about this. He doesn't want any part of this conversation right now. And interestingly, Jason Kidd, he compared Luka to a young Picasso. And then he said, I don't know if anybody ever told Picasso he can use all his paints, but I need to remind Luka to rely on his teammates. So certainly nobody in Dallas wants this to be about promoting Luka for MVP. And let's be honest, the only way he would have a realistic chance at the end of the season is if the Mavericks make a significant leap in the Western Conference. Luka Doncic with the Mavericks as a 6 seed is not an MVP candidate, no matter what kind of production he puts up. So it is a situation where maybe less ball dominance could be more of a chance for him.
Do they have the right teammates around him, though? Particularly Kristaps Porzingis. We know, we've talked to you before, it's well documented about their relationship, but are the right teammates there for him?
Well, then, and we'll find out. Therein lies potentially the problem. And, one thing that they've talked about is having, other guys be more playmakers, more ball handlers. Well, you didn't go add any playmaking and ball handling this offseason. So, that's a challenge. They want Luka to be fresher at the end of the games, but they didn't add options to take that pressure off of them. And then so much of this does come down to Kristaps Porzingis. And, Jason Kidd says he wants Porzingis starting at the 5, wants him to, quote, be a basketball player, feel comfortable putting the ball on the floor, taking mid-range shots. Frankly, a lot of the things that Rick Carlisle essentially took out of Porzingis' diet because the efficiency wasn't there. So that's the plan, and we'll see what the results are.
All right, speaking of J. Kidd, what are the expectations for him in year one?
Luka Doncic said when he's asked about MVP, he says there's one goal for the team, for himself, that's to win a championship. And look, this is a team that has been bounced from the first round the last couple of years. Hasn't won a playoff series since Jason Kidd was winning a ring 11 years ago. And so if they're not taking significant steps in that direction, it has to be considered a disappointing season. If it's one and done again in Dallas, then you've got a team that is kind of stuck on, I'm not going to say the mediocrity treadmill, but you're not running a whole lot faster than that if you can't.
Initially, when it first happened, it sucked, but it's a part of the game. I think I was overdoing it when I was training because I felt like I had this huge chip on my shoulder, this huge boulder that I was just getting after it overly every day, and it just happened. But the process through healing has been great. Been working with the team, trainer every day, so it's been good.
So NBA Media Day continues, and earlier today, Zion Williamson, as you heard there, talked about his fractured right foot that he suffered this offseason. So we bring in Andrew Lopez, who joins us now, does a phenomenal job covering the Pelicans for us here at ESPN. So, Andrew, this is pretty huge news out of New Orleans. Have you spoken to Zion about it?
Yeah, I did, and I asked him what was his expectations. Is he going to be able to be ready for the regular season? He said yes. Now, David Griffin dropping the napalm bomb that is the Zion foot surgery news as soon as we get started here at Media Day. It was the 5th metatarsal in his right foot. It happened before Summer League. He's already had the surgery. Their team doctors were in on that. And it's all about just his return to play, which everybody is hopeful, we're going to use that word hopeful, that Zion's going to be ready to start the regular season.
Should we be worried about his injury history at this point?
It's getting concerning. Anytime you're getting into lower leg injuries, especially with a guy of his size, it does become concerning. He had the knee injury, obviously, to start. The injuries that ended his season last year, both thumbs from the amount of hits he was taking in the lane. But anytime you get to a foot, I think you want to make sure that that's completely healed before you get him back on the court. So there's going to be no rush, although they still think, like I said, he'll be ready for the regular season.
What about his all-star teammate, Brandon Ingram, there in New Orleans? What are you hearing about his leadership heading into this upcoming season?
David Griffin said the offseason for the Pelicans started once Brandon Ingram got a group of guys together in Phoenix. I remember that was around the time of the NBA Finals. Eric Bledsoe, before he got traded, was also one of the guys there. It was about 8 to 10 people that Brandon was talking about. But Brandon has always been a quiet leader, and he's led by example, and he's done that this year again. Also, Brandon came in looking a little bit bigger. He's listed 190. He put a little bit of weight on, he said, so he can get through an entire 82-game season.
All right, Andrew, you're the man. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. All right, so Zion Williamson broke his foot during workouts around Summer League and had surgery, as we heard that. Pelicans Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations, David Griffin, said it's not terribly likely the All-Star plays during the preseason, but he is on pace, as you heard Andrew say, to be ready for the regular season. So let's welcome back Zach and Ramona here. So, Zach, Are you concerned about Zion's injury history?
Look, I'm not a doctor, but I know by now, anytime I hear the word metacarpal associated with a very large human being, I get the shakes. I get a little bit nervous. So absolutely, this is an unprecedented physical specimen. Zion is like if Lawrence Taylor played basketball and could jump out of the gym. We've just never seen a guy jump, land like this at this height, at this weight. So yes, it's a concern. Is it panic time? No, we've seen guys with this same injury have long, fine careers. Sometimes they have to change their game a little bit. But Zion's young, he's explosive. It's not panic time yet, but it is starting to pile up where you have to at least have it in the back of your mind a little bit.
Yeah, when I hear the word foot injury with a player like Zion, that is a very scary injury for a big man, because you know the history of big man with foot injuries. Whether you want to say Bill Walton or Sam Bowie, I mean, Greg Oden. I mean, go all down the line. But to me, if he's healthy, he's ready to go most of this season. This is a really important season for the Pelicans. Zach, you got me all excited about them on the last episode of The Low Post. They have so much talent. They've really changed things around where they should be a little better defensively, at least. But Zion's a key to everything there. And if he's not out there for most of the season, if he's not out there for most of these games, if he's not available to them, or if this is a recurring injury, if this leads to other injuries, then I don't know what you can count on from them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that certainly unfolds as well, and if he is indeed going to be ready to play in the regular season. All right, coming up, we'll get an update from Clippers Media Day on Kawhi Leonard's status, speaking of injuries, for this upcoming game playing against each other. If it was Sue Bird's last game, we just want to show her some love here on her legendary career. Man, what a great job, Momo, right? Insane. All right, speaking of insane, the NBA, it's Media Day. It's always insane. And in Golden State, San Francisco, the Warriors. Let's talk to Nick Friedel. Thanks for joining us, Nick. We'll start with Andrew Wiggins, not vaccinated and has not been granted a medical exemption as the season approaches. So, Nick, is this vaccination story becoming a distraction for the team?
The answer is no, George, and the reason why is because we just heard from Bob Myers and Steve Kerr a little while ago. Their messaging is very clear. When opening night hits, they expect everybody to be out there together. No headaches at all. As we stand here right now, Wiggins is supposed to talk to the media in a couple minutes, but the hope certainly inside the organization is that when the season comes, Wiggins will take the vaccine and everybody will be out there ready to roll for the new season. So the reason why the hope is so strong is because the conversations with Wiggins and the team have been ongoing throughout the summer, and they believe when push comes to shove, he'll get the shot.
Wow, fascinating. Speaking of guys who will be on the floor, Klay Thompson has missed the last 2 seasons due to various injuries. What kind of a boost is it for the team having him back around, and what's the expectation for his timeline?
George, he's been walking around here the last 20 minutes or so in a Jackie Moon outfit. I mean, he's got the ball spinning all over the place. Everybody's cracking up around here. He's lightening the mood. But Kerr just said, look, this guy makes everybody else feel a lot better about what's going on. Now, specific to a timeline, I asked Bob Myers about that, and they're non-committal because they want Klay Thompson to come to them and say, I'm ready to roll. Ramona reported a couple weeks ago, the Warriors' hope is somewhere around Christmas, but Myers also said it could be December, it could be January. They just don't want to put any limits on his rehab. They're hoping that Klay comes to them at some point in the next couple months and says, let's roll, I'm ready to get back out there. But they know it's not just him who has to have the final say. It will be in consultation the whole way with the Warriors medical staff.
Well, brother, it was great to consult with you on the Warriors. Great to see you, man. Thanks for joining us. All right.
Always, buddy.
There is Nick Friedel. I want to stick with the Warriors here, bring Zach back and Ramona back into the fold here. So the Warriors are a polarizing team this season. So, Ramona, what's a more likely outcome for them? Being a top 4 seed in the West or return to the play-in tournament?
I really have to think about that, and I think look at Zach's getting ready to answer that. I want to say top 4 because I think when Klay Thompson comes back, he just changes everything for them defensively, but also in the way that he sets things up for Steph Curry. But I don't know what Klay Thompson are we going to get. How long is he really going to miss? If he's targeting somewhere around Christmas, could be a little bit before, could be a little right around there. that's missing a fourth of the season. I mean, that's missing a significant chunk of games. And so the reason I say top 4 is that's a very hopeful, optimistic vision of what the Warriors could be. That's if everybody's healthy. But the top of the West has a lot of injuries elsewhere. Kawhi's injured, Jamal Murray. So I think the top of the West is wide open.
I hate this question. This is a devilish question. I went back and forth a lot of times. But I'm going top 4. And Ramona hit why. Jamal Murray, I don't know when he's coming back. Kawhi Leonard, I don't know when or if he's coming back this season. Now, I don't know when Klay Thompson is coming back. I don't know when Andrew Wiggins is going to take the vaccine. The Warriors seem optimistic it's going to be very soon, and he can play right away, and that's important for them. So assuming that happens, I'm going top 4 because I think the Warriors last season rediscovered their identity playing a little smaller, more Draymond at center, more ball movement, more cutting in the last 20, 30 games. They were plus 10 per 100 possessions with Steph and Draymond on the floor and no James Wiseman. Last year, they were torn between, are we trying to develop? Are we trying to win now? Maybe a little of this, maybe a little of that. Now they're just trying to win. And with that kind of clarity, I think this team has a pretty high ceiling, particularly when Klay comes back. So I'm going to swallow hard and go top 4 seed.
All right, so when I read this question in the rundown, I immediately said, Zach is going to hate this question. And by the way,
look at you diving in, though.
I too hate the question. And here's why I'm going to say neither. How about that?
No,
okay,
don't get to
they're
do
going to
that.
be in between there. How about that? All right, take them apples.
You don't get to do that. You
no,
have to choose.
I do. I'm hosting today. I get to do what I want. So how about that? I'm driving the car today. All right, stay in the West. You two stick around. We'll be back in a second. Staying in the West, we welcome in Om Young-Masuk live from Clippers Media Day. Om, what are you hearing about Kawhi's timeline to return to the court? Speaking of returning to the court.
Well, Kawhi just got done talking to us about 10 minutes ago, and I thought he gave a pretty good hint of his intentions for this season when he was asked why he signed a 3+1 extension. He said ideally he would have liked to sign a 1+1 because that would have meant perhaps more money down the road because he could sign a 5-year after that. But he did not want speculation to happen about would Kawhi leave the Clippers. And also, Kawhi said he wanted to give himself a chance to come back. Had he taken a 1+1, he probably wouldn't have taken the risk of coming back. So I think that's a good indication and hint of where Kawhi's head is at, that he wants to play this season. The Clippers are not touching a time frame when it comes to Kawhi. They will not say anything. Ty Lue joked today when I asked him, do you expect him to come back in the playoffs? Do you actually have that in the back of your head? And he was like, hey, I want him back October 21st, but we're not going to put any pressure on Kawhi Leonard.
Fascinating. Now, Paul George, his teammate, will be taking on more of the scoring load for the Clippers this season. What are folks saying about his ability to step up to that challenge after what we saw this postseason?
I think the proof is in the pudding. We saw what Paul George did in the playoffs without Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi went down in Game 4, the second round against Utah, and what Paul George did was basically average 30 points, 11 rebounds, and nearly 6 assists without Kawhi in the 8 games without him, taking the Clippers to the Western Conference Finals. Paul George came in today and told us that he is in a great space mentally. It's day and night compared to how he felt in the bubble. Remember, he had the courage to kind of say that he was feeling a little depressed in the bubble. And so now he's feeling very happy. He loves this roster. He's with his BFF, Reggie Jackson. And he also said he's ready to be the number 1 option and be like Indiana Pacers Paul George again. I think he's poised for a big season.
Well, we're happy to see you, despite a rare gray day in September in Los Angeles. Om Young-Masuk at Clippers Media Day. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. All right, coming up next, with Kyrie Irving's vaccination status in question, how worrisome is this for the Nets? Stick around. You're watching The Jump.